Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host Raider, and this is my filler video. And I wanted to make a PTSD video for non-combat stressors, but I just didn't have time to research everything today. So the filler video it is. In this video, I wanted to talk about the VA's training process and kind of how that has degraded over time. So, and what I mean by that is the training process for VSRs and RVSRs has drastically changed and altered from whenever I first got hired on at the VA. So it used to be historically that I got hired on as a VSR first, and that used to be a 6-week program in which you would get flown to a training site. So in my case, it was Denver, and you would live there for 6 weeks. They would put you up in a hotel. I got put up in the Hyatt Hotel, had a kitchenette, had everything. And they would give you a travel card in which you got a daily, well, weekly budget for food. So, in addition to your normal wage, you get this weekly budget of food. In the morning, they would bus you to the regional office. You'd have classes for 8 hours that day. You would get bused back to the hotel. The rest of the time is yours. The weekends are yours. But for 6 weeks, you were there. You had to be accounted for. And while you were in the training, they had a training division. So they had trainers who were professional trainers, and they would train you on the material. Now, they'd never done the job before, but they were good at teaching you what to do, not how to do it. And so what would happen is they would have these VSRs, and for the RVSRs during that time period, they would have RVSRs also that would come and show you how to do the things. Like you'd raise your hand and one of them would come over. They would fly in these trainers from all over the nation from different ROs. And I mean, like there were hundreds upon hundreds of VSRs in every class from all over the nation. So, I mean, like it was amazing. The training was outstanding. I didn't leave one day having one question not answered. Like it was fantastic. Like, and the reason why I'm as skilled as I am is because I went through that training. Now, unfortunately, and this happened through the RVSR too, but unfortunately, what happened is COVID-19 happened, and I remember the day that I got told, "Hey, look, you got to go home," and I'm like, "For the day? Like, what's going on?" And they're like, "No, you've got to take your monitors with you. You got to take your everything with you. You're working from home from now on." And I've been at home since 2019. And what happened was is they shut down the entire education division because education is in person, right? So they did away with it. And then what they did during that time period is they went to this online format in which you had to do online courses. Well, during the online courses, it's not that it was all online that was the problem. It's that, like, for the VSRs, they cut them down from 6 weeks down to 2 weeks. So they said, "Okay, you can learn the exact same stuff in 2 weeks," which didn't go over well. So since 2019, they've been training individuals in both the VSR and RVSR role digitally, online, and we have had mixed um mixed results. So people who are natural self-starters did well within the online format if that was their learning style. However, if that was not your learning style and you are not a self-starter, we had it to where people were turning over left and right. I mean, and by turning over, I mean they were just washing out of the program because they couldn't get it. They're like, "Wait a minute, how do I do this?" The instructions on the online thing doesn't tell me how to do the thing. It tells me what to do, but it doesn't tell me how to do it. Like if you've never interacted with a program before, it doesn't tell you how to interact with it and get the desired result. So, I mean, you were having people come out of challenge that were a hot mess. And what happens is you would go for like VSR's historic, well, they would go for the 2 week thing. And then after that, what would happen is they would then have this like online digital, um, I guess, mentoring time, like a 2 week mentoring time or something like that. And I know that the raters had like a month long, they called it classroom. And what happened was they would, these you'd be trained by the quality review team. And the quality review team is meant to review for errors and whatnot. What they're not meant to do is supplement um, the training and teaching division. So during COVID, what happened is you had these people who had this very set job now take on this new responsibility of being trainers, being c- basically mentors to some degree. But the problem is, and you had two different groups of them, and I'll tell you the problem. So the two different groups was AQRS, which were in charge of the VSRs for pre-development, and the authorizers and the VSRs in post-development. And then you had what were known as RQRS, rating QRS, and they were in charge of the raters. And the problem that you kind of had was that a lot of these people had never done the job that they were training the raters and the VSRs to do. Like some of them have been coaches in the job, some of them had been hired on as QRT, but they had never done the job before. So I don't know if you can see the problem with that, but the people that are training you don't actually know how to do the job. They know how to tell you what to do, but they don't know how to tell you how to do it. So ever since COVID has happened, you've had this environment where there's this degradation where the actual dedicated trainers aren't training you with the support of people who actually do the job to be able to fill in that gap if there's any vulnerabilities in the training where, hey, Tim just doesn't get it that way, can you show him a different way to get it? Cool, thanks man. Like that kind of interaction didn't happen after 2019. And then what happened later on in like 2022, 2023, I want to say 2023, when we started going back to the office, what they would do is they would actually have it to where you would come in and then have a QRT person teaching you, but once again, in person to where you could raise your hand, but they didn't know what they were doing. Like, and I'll take that one to the grave. Like QRT, oof, QRT, I call them quit really trying. And I there's half of me that empathizes with them because if you wanna lump an entire new role onto them of being trainers on top of their normal job, they've got to do so much that they become overwhelmed. Got it. But I also don't have empathy for them if they don't know how to do the job that they're overseeing. I fundamentally have a problem with that. I don't think, if you're a coach or you're a quality review person over a specific group of people, you had better have done that job, in my opinion, and you should be the best at it. So that way you can help other people to be the best at their job. It is so unhelpful. And this is a rant. I'm going into a rant. I can feel it. I feel it. It's like a stroke. It is beyond frustrating to have people that you are supposed to go to, like your chain of command, who have no functional working understanding of how you do your job. They're just like, "Did you get your numbers today? Oh, you did? Okay, good. You're a good boy. Did you not get your numbers? Oh, you're not a good boy today." Like I've it, it weirds me out because, think about it from the veteran's perspective, your guys' perspective. You would hope, right, that the people that are in charge are the best at the thing that's being done. So that way they can determine whether or not everything's being done right. And that's where we get a lot of our problems, right? Is that the people who are in charge have no functional understanding as to how anything works, you know? And that's how you can get Doug Collins, sitting there going, I don't know who works under me because our system is broken. Well, it's broken because nobody understands it. Because the people that would understand it are the people that work in the system, and they're not the ones that get hired for these higher end jobs. So like the higher end jobs, I think only like if you want to look at coaches, so coaches were like our supervisor. Only 2 out of maybe 12 coaches in the entire regional office that I work for have actually done the job before, ever in their life. And it's not like I would hope that the coaches should not only be able to do the job, but they are doing the job. If they're not doing coach duties, they should be still doing claims so that way they can familiarize themselves with the process. If your leadership is disconnected from what the frontline staff does, there's no way for them to correct course when something goes awry. This is just my opinion. I it's just how I feel. Once again, this is a fluff video. I'm kind of filler video, but I don't know if you noticed just in my inflection and my tone how frustrating this is. It's part of the reason why I'm retiring is because I can't hold up like if you know what you're doing, you are a unicorn in your environment. I spend the majority of my time. I get my claims done in the day, my quota requirement. Spend the rest of the day answering questions that should not have been asked had they got the right training. Now, we have something that's known as an AES survey. Okay, it's a VA survey that gets put out, and every single year, guess what's on it? Training and communication. Because those are the two things, those are our two complaints that we have at the end of the year. Typically, it starts in April actually. But when we do the AES survey to complain about what's going wrong with the environment, the top two are communication and training. Because management doesn't know how to communicate with us because they've never done the job before for the most part. And when it comes down to the actual like training aspect of it, we keep saying the training is horrible. And leadership just keeps patting QRT on the back going, "Do you know what? These guys are great. Best darn QRT in the whole state. In the whole nation. Like QRT is really doing the hard work." Yeah. And yet the claims accuracy is so horrible, right? If you address training in a meaningful manner, anyone that took training from COVID on should go back into physical training. They should cycle people out, retrain them. Because I'll tell you, you don't even want to know the numbers of people that got recycled. You don't. You don't want to know how much the government spent on recycling people. I mean, for every class, I think we had like a 40% recidivism rate or retention rate or whatever you want to call it, to where like less than half the people actually stayed for any meaningful amount of time. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if, the individuals worked at 7-Eleven and it took 2 days to train them. The problem is that it takes 2 years for a raider to get trained up to do enough to become familiarized with the laws, rules, and regulations in order to put out a quality product. So, I mean, it's a big problem. So, training is a huge, huge deal. And I mean, Doug Collins shouldn't, and I should probably be quiet about Doug Collins. I don't want him hearing me, but I wish that Doug Collins would focus on training and taking it back to the old school. I mean, you might kind of cringe about how much money was spent on that, but I'd rather spend money on a stipend, a food budget than I would to retrain somebody or well to train 6 people to try to do a job and 5 of them fail out. And we have to spend that money again and again and again and again. I mean, that's where the budget went for the VA was having to retrain people, in my opinion. So anyway, I don't know. Like, I just want to point out how ludicrous the training currently is to the point that I don't think like, and the problem that I see is senior people like myself are wanting to leave. People who have that old school training, they know what they're doing, they have the education, they've got the experience, they've got all this stuff. They want to leave. And when they do, you're like, oh, yeah, well, you know what? You could think, hey, look, that leaves room for somebody else. Yay. No, because that person won't know what they're doing, which puts your claim in jeopardy. Every time somebody that doesn't know what they're doing is allowed to touch your claim, shenanigans happen. And I don't know if you've been listening to the veteran community lately, but shenanigans are on the rise. This is the reason why I wanted to create the channel, is to help train raiders after dark. If you care, like for my local RO, to help train VSRs after dark. So that way they could watch my videos and help themselves to get better at the job. That's how desperate I was, guys. I was this desperate to help with the problem that I started this channel. And then I was like, look, I can't even anymore. So I moved on to just, if I can't help the staff, then I can help the veterans. And that's where we're at currently. So I don't know if, this rant kind of appeals to you at all. I mean, it's a filler video. It's on Sunday, but I just, it's, it's really sad because it didn't used to be like this. COVID really damaged a lot of things in the process. And I'm not throwing shade at anyone or any administration or anything like that. I'm just saying we haven't corrected course back to anything that looks like it will help the circumstances. And there's a lot of cooking the books currently on error trends. Because what happens is, let's say you're a rater or VSR, and let's say your quality gets so low that you fail your quality for the year. Well, you get put on a performance improvement plan. At which point in time, the same people that trained you, who, and I forgot to say this, but the same people who don't know how to do your job are going to retrain you on how to do your job. And then they're going to give you softball reviews. But when it's time to take you off the PIP, so a local person will do your quality reviews during the time that you're on the performance improvement plan, which I've never been on one. But what happens is, it's time to put you on quality and production, like when you return back to quality and production, local quality doesn't typically pull your quality reviews. So if you're in Washington State, then Portland could pull your, Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine, or wherever, Puerto Rico could pull your particular claim for quality review. And they do that. They keep it to where your regional office isn't the one pulling the quality, so that way there's no bias to where they can go, "Oh no, it's my cousin Jim, so I'm just gonna make that go away." But it doesn't solve the problem. The way we're trying to fix the problem doesn't solve anything, because if the people who are teaching you are not the people who know how to do the job, then you don't actually get the training that you need to be successful, and then you fail out. So I don't know. I just wanted to kind of ramble and talk about, the lack of training and how bad it really is, guys. I'm not embellishing. It is every single year. It's on the list of things that people complain about. It's in the top 3 every single year. Training. It's horrible. QRT's training is just atrocious. I mean, I wouldn't trust them with a microwave. I'd be afraid. I would be very afraid. I mean, I call them quit really trying for a reason. And I know I'm digging at them, but they deserve it. I, they're not, like, they get weird when they call a quality error. The way the quality error system works is they have to call even if it's frivolous, they can get an error if they don't call an error. If somebody else would have called an error in that situation, if they reviewed the claim, they would get an error for not having called said error. So what it makes them do is it conditions them, little operant conditioning and little classical conditioning there, that they have to they'll call any error that they can find, even if it's not true. They don't get in trouble for calling erroneous errors. They get in trouble if they didn't call an error. So it's, speeding tickets for everybody when it comes to the VA. So that's part of the reason why, like, if they don't know what they're doing, and QRT for the most part doesn't know what they're doing, I mean, I honestly sometimes question whether some of them can read. And I know that sounds very mean, and it's meant to be mean because I mean it from the bottom of my soul. Um, I one time, and this might dox me a little bit, but I one time got an error because I didn't get a medical opinion for fatty liver. Now, I tried fighting that error, and I said, "Hey, look, if I did the thing that you said, I'd get an error, right? Like, so no, I'm not doing that." And you have this like recon process where you can recon errors, which means you can send them back and say, "Hey, look, this shouldn't have been called because of this right here." And I did that twice. And on the third time, you get to meet on a virtual call with the QRT that called the error. And so I went to my coach and I said, "Look, I I mean it. I'm not going to be nice if we go into this, because you understand I can't actually grant fatty liver. It's something that it's an abnormal lab finding. I could never grant it in any case. I don't understand what's wrong with these people. They're not reading, they're top sheeting, they're calling an error because they're afraid to get an error, and they know they messed up, but I mean, it's just they will dig in and uphold the error to where I have to get something that wastes taxpayers' money, that wastes your time because you're like, oh, I'm getting a examination for fatty liver. Okay, cool. There's a chance I could get granted. No, we're just playing FF games because the QRT doesn't want to be wrong. Because if they're wrong, then they'll get an error. Like, so I don't know. So I ended up taking it to my coach. My coach had to go, and then they finally canceled the meeting and said, "Well, okay, I just disagree with the fact of we're going to make it a non-critical error, which just means that it's still an error, but it doesn't count against my performance." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So that's a good example of somebody that shouldn't have the job that they have or the authority or power that they have. And I know I'm a little salty on this one, but I I mean, QRT drives me insane. And I do have some empathy for them because they were kind of jammed into a role that they shouldn't be. But some of them don't take the role seriously enough, and they don't actually take their job seriously enough. That they don't just, they just do things to do things. They call things to call things. It delays your claim when they do that. It does. It makes us have to actually like do these 930 corrections for no reason. It doesn't affect the outcome of your claim. It's just them just doing something so that way they don't get an error because everyone at the VA is terrified of getting an error. So they do the weirdest things known to man so that way they don't get it. And part of it is back to the training. The QRT doesn't get, like, they don't have good training themselves. So they don't know actually what is an error, what is not an error, how to call an error, how not to call an error. I would love for Doug Collins to pull the overturned error statistics because that wastes every time they do that, it wastes everyone's time. It wastes the rater's time because you got to take at least an hour to determine whether or not the error was correct or not. If you do a recon, you got to research all all the laws, rules, and regulations to overcome the error. And these are errors that don't necessarily affect the outcome of your claim or your effective date or nothing. It's just, did you do this in the right order? So I don't know. But anyway, that's about enough of my rant for tonight. I'm going to be doing the PTSD video for non-combat stressors tomorrow. Let me know if you like the behind the scenes kind of talk. That's kind of what I think I'll just label it as that. But anyway, that's all I got for you tonight. Raider out.